What's up, Barnhill family, and welcome back to your home for all things combat sports.
Yo.
So, Nick, there is just feverish debate at 155 now. You know, some people think Ilia should defend his belt for the first time against Paddy Pimblett. A lot of people, especially the purists, think that Arman Tsarukyan is the deserving contender, and they're probably right. Justin Gaethje, sign me up whenever he's fighting because he's always bringing the action, and against a fighter like Ilia, I think that fight would be incredible. But I kind of want to put all that aside for a second, because regardless of which of those three directions you think the UFC ought to go in, I think there is one thing that all of the fans can actually agree on. And that is that if Ilia is victorious in his first title defense, that the sure next opponent has to be Islam Makhachev. I mean, one thing that we learned watching the title fight that just happened where Ilia just brutally dismantled Charles Oliveira was that he would be a very worthy adversary for Islam. Now, there's a lot of different moving parts. And I think once again, just like the Jack Della Maddalena Bilal Muhammad fight, all roads kind of run through the next 170 title fight. So does Islam beat Jack? Does Islam lose to Jack? I think that's going to play into what weight class this fight might potentially happen in. But I want to get your thoughts. I mean, obviously, both of these guys have business with one other opponent, Islam versus Jack, and then Ilia versus either Paddy, Arman, or Justin. But after that, you got to put these two together, right?
Absolutely, yeah. And now after the last weekend where we had Charles Oliveira, everybody's favorite fighter, get brutally knocked out, and also that's a common opponent, right? We had a 45er that was a common opponent in Volkanovski, but now we had a 55er. And even though the MMA math doesn't ever seem to add up, we still like to have common opponents, and we like to try to draw this map out as to who we think is going to win when we're leading into fights. And Islam and Ilia, after last weekend, is only about 10x more the fight we want to see. Everybody now is going, okay, we got our answer as to what Ilia might look like at 155. Now we need to see what he's going to look like against the guy that's been reigning over the division basically since Khabib left, right?
Yeah.
And so I really think that Ilia versus Islam has to happen, and it really has to happen with both of them winning. Now, it can happen if Islam loses to Jack and decides to come back down, but a lot of steam would come off of that fight if that happened. If they both go out and win their next fights, everything is on the line. Now we're talking about the biggest, the most historical and record-breaking fight of all time. And I don't think pay-per-view wise or numbers wise it would break the numbers, but when you're talking about Islam Makhachev, if he beats Jack Della Maddalena, becomes a two-division world champion, right? We're not going champ anymore. It's two-division world champion. And
but all that means for me, by the way, is just that you're not holding up a division. It's the same thing. I mean, when Conor was doing it and then the other Daniel Cormier, what happens is divisions just get held up. So for all intents and purposes, Ilia has accomplished the same thing as those guys have. He's just not holding up a division in the process.
Exactly. And I still look at Ilia as a champ. I even refer to him as champ. I don't say two-division world champ because that's just not what that's a boxing thing. We say champ. And if you are lucky enough to get a champ, which is triple champ, now that's your title. And I think that when I talk about the numbers and the record breaking and all the history that will be made in that fight, it's not the pay-per-views. I still think Conor and Khabib and some Conor's biggest numbers would be the biggest pay-per-views. But when you're talking about now two champs, one's going up for a three-division world champ title. This is the most epic, the most gold-rich fight the UFC's ever made, right? We've had double champs before. I think there's been 10 of them. I think Ilia was number 10. But none of them have fought each other. And the timing has been weird, or the divisions have been weird. It didn't make any sense. This would be for all the marbles, right? We've got 155, which is known as the crown jewel of all divisions, the most talent rich, and it's been the biggest division as far as stars go. So it's a meaningful division. So we've got that. We've got 170, which for all
hottest
intents
division in the sport right now.
All intents and purposes is just firing on all cylinders right now. So yeah, I think that the fact that those two divisions are kind of merging together, and there's two guys that are steering the ship, so to speak, Islam and Ilia, which is crazy. A 45er and a 55er are now controlling both 155 and 170. But I think all we need to do is make sure that these two guys win their next fight. And that's easier said than done because we know Islam's getting Jack next. And even though a lot of people see him being able to beat Jack and that being a decent fight for him to go up and get that 170 belt for, that's not a walk in the park. It's definitely not like any of his title fights he had at 155. Ilia, on the other hand, after what we saw him do to Charles Oliveira, and now we realize the skill level he's truly at, especially at 155, I don't see anybody on the 155 roster that could beat Ilia. So I'm not going to say he's a shoo-in. Anything can happen in this sport, but I don't think there's a 155er alive that can beat him. So we can assume he's going to carry the load, or at least his portion of the load, to get to this next fight, this epic 3-division world title fight against Islam, the 2-division world champ. I think if he beats whoever he fights next, and Paddy wants it next, but Drickus apparently leaked that it's Justin versus Paddy on his card, so we don't know what direction the UFC is going. I personally think they're going to throw a little bit of a curveball at us and wait till next weekend, wait to see, or not next weekend, 2 weekends from now when Dustin Poirier fights Max Holloway. Dustin's beat him twice. I know Dustin's retiring on this. I know it's in New Orleans, but it's not fair that Ilia Topuria didn't leave that fight against Max Holloway without the BMF. I think the only way you can make a fight with Islam Makhachev and Ilia even more epic, throw another belt on it, right? So we add the BMF. Dustin and Max are fighting for the BMF. If Dustin's able to get the jump on Max once again, is he really going to turn down one final title fight? Now he's got some gold to put up himself. He's going against Ilia Topuria, a guy who's going to stand and box with him, something we've always loved and enjoyed and wanted to see out of Dustin Poirier. Honestly, I'm happy with Dustin's career if he wants to retire after this next one, but it's going to be pretty enticing if he wins and he has the BMF belt and there's nobody at the top of 155 that really stands as much of a threat to Ilia. I say the UFC would probably make that fight. And if that happens, again, I lean towards Ilia winning that fight and maintaining that 170, 155 clash between him and Ilia to make it this epic thing. That's basically the only way I see this fight happening and being the biggest thing that the UFC can make right now. If Islam goes up and loses to Jack, we can still get the fight at 155, and we likely still will, but it won't have the same sort of feel and that same sort of energy as if they were to both win their next fight, and now we're making that double champ, going for triple champ, fighting a double champ.
So you think that the fight with Ilia and Islam is biggest if it happens at 170?
I do.
So, and I think you're probably right, but I think that does make for some challenges for Ilia, especially because Islam would be huge, would have a massive size advantage
for sure.
But I want to get to that in a second, because one thing Ilia Topuria said after beating Charles Oliveira and becoming the new 155 champion that I feel like the media kind of brushed over it. It was said, and then people talked about it for a minute, and then it just kind of went away.
Right.
And that is to say that he mentioned the possibility of being the alternate weigh-in fighter for Max versus Dustin Poirier.
Right.
Which is interesting.
Yeah.
But and that's one of the things I really like about Ilia, right?
Yeah.
That's a weird thing to say, right? But,
for sure.
But it's pretty interesting that the double champion, the undefeated fighter is going to be the backup for a guy who's not he's fighting for the BMF belt, but he's not the champion, and the other guy is the guy that he just beat.
Right.
Now, I think Ilia would like that BMF belt.
Of course.
And I think he would weigh in for that. Dustin Poirier is one of my favorite fighters. Like, I think that when it's all said and done, we'll look back and cherish his career as much as we have anybody else.
That's right.
Dustin Poirier is also set financially, but he's a game dude, man. Yep. And I think that there's a small chance, 25 to 30%, that if he beats Max Holloway for the third time and Ilia Topuria starts calling his name, that fight could happen.
Oh, yeah.
So, what happens then? How does Dustin Poirier potentially throw a wrench into all of this? And I want to shelf that for just a second. And then I also think, that Dana White said he was not happy with Paddy getting into the cage after the fight.
Yeah.
Now, why would that be? Not because Dana White wants to do Arman Sarukian in any favors, certainly.
Or not that he doesn't like fighters cutting promos in the cage after fights. He certainly loves that.
Those are things that Dana loves.
Right.
So then I'm thinking to myself, okay, why was Dana mad at that? And as I said, it's certainly not because of Arman Tsarukyan. Dana would just assume not give Arman a title fight ever. So what is it that Dana was waiting for? There was a piece of the puzzle that we had not yet been privy to. That I think Dana White had in his back pocket. Before we finish up this conversation, guys, there's one thing that we noticed that's quite concerning, and that is that most of you that watch our videos are actually not subscribed to the channel.
What's up with that?
Guys, you helped us get to 10K, and we thank you so much for that. We are now on a mission to 15,000 subs. We're looking to do it within the next 3 months, and we're less than 2,000 away. Your subscription to this channel helps us out tremendously and allows us to keep putting out the best content that we can for y'all. Back to the conversation.
Thank you.
And I personally believe it's the Dustin Poirier Max Holloway fight.
That's it.
Because I believe that if Dustin Poirier knocks out Max Holloway or just beats him decisively, Dana would just throw up the lob to see if Dustin swings at it. Do you want to do one more for the undisputed against Ilia Topuria? Now,
and you also bring a belt into this, right?
Right. Now, why does that matter? Because we talk about Ilia versus Islam being not potentially, it would be the most gold-rich title fight of all time.
For sure.
Because even if Islam's coming back down, he's still the double champ.
Right.
So you have double champ versus double champ. And if you have Ilia going up, you have double champ versus double champ with the possibility of a triple champ.
First ever.
What would make it even more sweet than that? A quadruple champ. So if Ilia were to steal the BMF belt away from Dustin Poirier and then go up and fight Islam, you're talking about the BMF belt on the line and the 170 title on the line. And for Ilia, it could be 45, 55, 70, and BMF.
That's insane.
That is absurd.
He'd look like a boxer leaving the ring, right? He'd have one on every arm and every hip and everything.
Yeah, the Ring Magazine, the WBF, the the IBF,
the
and
ABC, DEFG.
Who knows? I mean, they've got so many belts in boxing now. I don't think anybody can keep up with the organizations. But that to me was the piece of the puzzle that I think Dana White was waiting on.
Yeah. Well, I agree with you on that. I think that Dustin is the dark horse. And I'll just say this briefly before I get into the Paddy stuff. If you look at the tour that Ilia has been on, and it's just an absolute storm of everybody's favorite fighter, right?
Yeah.
If Charles Oliveira is not your favorite fighter, it's probably Max Holloway. And if it's not him, you've got something with Australia and you love Volkanovski.
Up there, yeah.
But if it's not either of those three, it's
damn sure better be Dustin Poirier.
It's Dustin Poirier, right? So there's no question. So I'm at this point now where I love all those guys, but I kind of want to see Ilia continue to go out there and fight everybody's favorite fighters, not because I want to see Ilia knock off these legends, and I think that's likely what would happen, but these guys deserve big fights as well. Ilia is the biggest fight in the game right now, and Ilia is also, while he's doing all of this, right, all the memes, everybody's seeing all the memes and stuff, he is becoming this marketable, good-looking, but also a heel because he's killing everybody's favorite fighter, right?
Yeah.
You know, there's people after the fact that he beat Charles Oliveira, they're turning the video game on and unplugging the second controller that is, Ilia's controls, and they're just using Charles Oliveira to just beat him up, right? They're so angry about the whole situation. The only thing you can do, let's not try to get him on the good side of the fans, right?
Yeah.
Let's just keep him going. Let's give him Dustin Poirier next. Hell, if Paddy and Justin is what happens after, let's give him Justin Gaethje after that, right? We're going to knock off everybody's favorite fighters. That I say all that because I'm just kind of joking. I would love to see Dustin get another title shot, but I'd also like to see the BMF belt go to Ilia if he wins a fight. I mean, he's already won one fight for the BMF. It wasn't on the line.
He just didn't get the belt.
Yeah. Right. So I think that's the interesting aspect about Dustin. And Dustin has been bit by the bug like everybody else. He can't just ride off into the sunset if there's a title fight on the line. Now, if you're like Tony Ferguson, you have a 13-fight win streak and then you lose 7 in a row, yeah, it's a little bit easier to leave. But if they're offering, you have a belt and they're offering you a title fight, it's kind of hard to say no to that.
Well, yeah. I mean, okay, so Dustin Poirier, he's a millionaire.
Right.
He's a fan favorite. Mm-hmm. If he beats Max, which he's already done twice already, he's probably gonna win again. Mm-hmm. I mean, Max is always game, but you never know.
He's got his number.
I think that he's going to beat him again. Then he's also the BMF champ. So you have money, fame, recognition, belt. Mm-hmm. What's the one thing that has eluded you your whole career, and you've been right there.
On the cusp.
Right there on the cusp of it several
UFC
times.
title.
That's UFC gold.
Undisputed.
And I like to let sleeping dogs lie, right?
Yeah.
I love Dustin. I don't want Dustin to be pressured into something that he doesn't want to do.
Right.
But that being said, if he gets in there and cleans Max up and looks pretty good in the process, I think he will at least entertain the idea. But I want to circle back now to Ilia Islam, because I think that the weight class that it happens in makes a big difference for the fight itself.
It does.
Because Islam versus Ilia, whether Ilia, and I think we've established enough on this episode that the options for Ilia Topuria with the introduction of Dustin Poirier, if he gets past Max, are pretty limitless.
Yeah.
So if whoever the round robin of that, whoever the UFC lands on, Ilia is going to fight. He will be no less than a 3-1 favorite against any of them, including Arman, by the way, and I'll get into that as well. But after that, he's going to fight Islam Makhachev if the UFC knows what they're doing matchmaking wise, which I mean they do.
They've done pretty good so far.
What weight class does it happen in? 170 is challenging for Ilia for a lot of reasons. Islam's going to be massive at 170.
Yep.
Islam's going to be durable at 170. Islam is going to be strong as hell at 170.
That's right.
Now, is Ilia's power going to translate to 170? Well, it damn sure did to 155.
Yeah.
I don't see why it wouldn't at 170 either. Is his grappling going to be better at 170 when he's a little bit stronger? Probably so. But I think that a title fight at 170 for Topuria against Makhachev is way more challenging than a title fight at 155, because Islam is going to have to drain himself to get back to that weight. He's not going to be able to hover around that 205, 210 range, and then cut to 155. If it's at 170, he can kind of live there. If not, he's got to keep his frame a little bit smaller to get back to 170, which makes the size difference not as pronounced. So what weight class would you prefer to see that fight happen in? And do you think it makes a difference in the outcome of the fight?
I think the fight does need to happen at 170, and if it happens, it will happen at 170. I'm not convinced that we see Islam Makhachev ever fight again if he loses to Jack Della Maddalena. That might be a hot take, but do you expect Islam to go back down to 155 and ask for a title shot for the belt that was his?
No, it's a great question.
Or do you think he's just going to jump in line with Ian Gary and Joaquin Buckley and the rest of the boys at 170? I don't really see that. People are already saying he's got 2 or 3 fights left. They're assuming those are wins, right?
Boy, I hope Kamaru Usman didn't hear you just say that.
I know, right? I know, yeah. Usman's now...
Joaquin Buckley's taking a hot back seat.
He has. He's fallen out of the top. But either way, you get what I mean. That jumble
is
of
guys. Is he joining the pool?
Yeah, is he jumping in the ranks? I don't know. I really think that the fight needs to happen, but it really has to happen before a loss. And look, Jack is not an easy fight for Islam. I think Jack is very tough. And I also don't think that Ilia, if Ilia is going to be in an interesting position. Islam had a ton of power up until recently. Now he is not a belt holder. Mm-hmm. He's not a champion. He's not pound for pound number 1. Ilia is all of that.
Yeah.
So Ilia has a lot of power over Islam right now. And if Islam loses a fight at 170 and he comes back with his tail tucked and he's asking for a title shot, Ilia could be like, nah, I got other things to do. He could kind of show him the cold shoulder. And who knows what Dana would want to do at that point. I'm not 100% convinced they would want to just make that after Islam comes off a loss, because that's a little bit of a diminished fighter, right? We want to see this fight happen when both guys are still just constantly winning on this insane streak. The interesting caveat, and where I feel like Ilia could try to play some mental games with Islam, is if Islam does go up to 170 and loses, Ilia, I think Ilia is going to go, yeah, you want to come have your little belt back? I'm gonna go to 170. I'm gonna go fight Jack. I'll fight the guy you couldn't beat. And there's just so many ways that this can go, right? I don't see Islam, because these guys are the most alpha of the guys in the that you see in the UFC, right? Islam's not going to want to go back to Ilia's now division and ask for a title shot. And I just don't see him wanting to stick around and being a contender at 170. So I don't know what direction the UFC is going to go, but you have these pieces, right? Paddy clearly is fighting Justin Gaethje on the Dricus card, and Paddy knew that. And Paddy still jumped in that cage. And Dana was angry about that. But if you look at the whole landscape, right, they want Islam and Ilia to fight each other. Paddy's booked. They don't like Arman because he pulled out of that title fight. Justin Gaethje is booked with Paddy, so it's not him. We're running out of options as to who's a legitimate contender, and these guys are barely legitimate for Ilia at this point right now. So it's Islam. Islam's the next guy, but he's going to be up at 170. He said he doesn't want to come back down. And then the only other guy left is the fourth of four horsemen for everybody's favorite fighters, which is Dustin Poirier. You throw him into the mix, that kills 6 months of time. It lets Islam, settle his business with Jack, and then we figure out what we do from there. But I believe Ilia Topuria wins his next fight. Islam Makhachev better win his next fight, or he might lose out on that massive opportunity of fighting Ilia Topuria. And for me and for the fans and everybody else, I just hope we see it, and I don't know how Islam will react if he does lose at 170, and that's why I just feel like they both need to fight one more time. Jack's a tough fight. Ilia's going to probably get Dustin Poirier or Paddy, but I don't really see that one happening, honestly. I think he's going to fight Justin Gaethje. So I think Ilia's going to get Dustin Poirier. Unfortunately, I think he's going to clean him up. And then we're going to be figuring out what we do at 170 for this gold rich, like we're talking about, UFC historic event where we've got two weight class world champions fighting, and one of them's going for third, which is making history.
Yeah, I think that's well said. And I think, once again, everything runs through what happens with the title fight at 170.
Yeah, and can I just add one thing? Remember, I was making a point a few minutes ago, and I got side-railed. But one thing I wanted to say, you were wondering about what was going on with the Ilia Topuria situation after the fight. So Dana knows what he's doing, and he's not opposed to people jumping in the cage. Like, we're allowed to do this thing. Joe Rogan sort of took it on his own and decided to pull Paddy into the cage. But if you listen to the post-fight press conference, Dana was saying, I had, Ilia's family was there. His wife was there, dressed to the nines. His kid looked like $1 million. Just looked amazing. These are the shots that we wanted. Instead, we've got some scouser coming in who's 200 pounds if anything, and he's getting in a standoff with this guy who's got his son, who's a child, and his wife standing feet away from him. Instead of getting great pictures of all of this sort of stuff and putting it out there, kind of think about how when Conor won his belt for that first time, they had the kids and they had the D. Devlin and everything like that. That's the moment they were looking for Ilia. Instead, they got Paddy and Ilia face to face, which is fine. And that promo will be used at some point because they're going to fight each other. But I just don't think that was what the UFC wanted to fire off right after Ilia got that belt.
Yeah, and I think there was more to it than that, though. I think Dana had something else in mind.
Yeah.
And when I keep thinking back about what could it be, I keep coming back to Dustin Poirier.
It's gotta be
and I
him.
keep coming back to the fact that Ilia said, I'll weigh in as the backup fighter for Poirier versus Max, which is a weird thing to say.
Yeah.
So
in 2 weeks.
In 2 weeks, right? So obviously, I think that there's there is a piece to this puzzle with Ilia Topuria at 155 that the UFC is holding on to that they haven't released yet. And I think that piece is Dustin the Diamond Poirier.
I agree with you.